everybody. I hope you can hear me. I bet you can. Yay! I'm Jerika, and this is Dr. Fido. I'm so glad that the orientations in the stream are the same as the orientations in our chat, so when I gesture, it's actually correct. That's good. Okay, great. Hi. I am a STEM librarian. I offer programming at my library that's related to science, technology, engineering, and math. I have a brief history of science through my parents, and I just think science is really cool. I have a pet cat, so I know something about animals. But don't be fooled by my Gryffindor tie. I am a Hufflepuff. DP, over to you.
Hi, everybody. I'm Dr. Rochelle, my real human name, actually, aka the drunk phytologist, aka Dr. Fido. I know, Dr. Fido, aka DP. I am a research scientist, but I specialize in plant biology. But I also have specializations, I know, in genetics and microbiology, and I grew up in a family of huge nerds. And I have 4 cats who may guest star at any moment. Hopefully not, but we'll find out. It's fine.
So I was explaining to my parental units about this show and that you are a phytologist, and my mother was like, well, isn't that a botanist? Can you tell me what the difference between a phytologist and a botanist is?
So I guess the best way to put it is I am like a plant doctor. So, like, an anthropologist and a physician both study people. But
Sure.
like an anthropologist studies like populations of people and their cultures and their language versus a physician studies, anatomy and physiology and what makes the body work. Well, as a phytologist, I study plants and what makes plants work, and their organs and their physiology and stuff like that. Versus a botanist studies populations of plants and different species and how they relate to each other. So I'm most of the time like, I kind of know the groups that plants are in. So when we go on a hike and everyone's like, what's that plant? I'm like,
I don't know.
That's in this
It's a tree. It's a
tree.
bush.
It's a bush. And they say, but if it's like, oh, well, how does a plant drink? I can talk to you all day about that.
I see. Gotcha. That's very helpful distinction. Can you share with the people what your Harry Potter house is?
Oh, definitely Ravenclaw.
Nice. Cool.
Yeah.
Let's do a high five through the thing. Keep going. I'm closer than you are. Boo. Okay, great. It worked.
Hey.
Yeah, you're good. Okay, so thanks for indulging us with that silliness.
Yep, we're professionals.
Let me tell you a little bit more about this show. So, I produce a live play stream of Dungeons and Dragons with a small folk overlay. The skins of the people are tiny animals. So the players play animals instead of humans or elves or dwarves or gnomes or drow or whatever. And then Fido and I talk about the episodes. So if you haven't seen Friday's episode, that was 7/12. Yeah. You can go to our YouTube, which is youtube.com, and then search for Insight Check Pod. And then look for the date that it was uploaded, which would be July 12th, if you're in the Western Hemisphere, mostly. Anyway, so we're going to be talking about some of the stuff that happened in that episode. So, we can do that. We can talk about science. Also, I'm taking questions about production. If you want to ask me any of those, that's fine. But we have a whole agenda, so get ready for science. All right, let me show you first. Let me do a little preview. So I'm going to switch to this one. Yay, okay. So on your screen now you see a cute little picture of a bee hummingbird licking up some nectar from a flower that somebody's holding. for scale, I guess. So Hi is the familiar of Jink, and Hi is this hummingbird species. And I wanted to just show everyone the scale we're talking about. So we're talking about a little tiny bird. I believe bee hummingbird is the smallest bird in existence.
That we know of.
There might be smaller ones. Who knows? Maybe I just inhaled one now. That would be terrible.
Yeah, that would be terrible. But I'm a biologist, so I never say anything for sure. I'm just like, this is like what we kind of think, maybe.
Yes. So I just wanted to let everybody know what's going on there. And I'm just going to sneak preview this picture of a snail's face close up. And then we'll go back to this page to figure out why we're going to talk about that. Okay, where we're going to start. Okay. I wrote down a few questions, and we have a lot of topics to discuss, but why don't we start with some of these questions? Can a mouse manipulate a doorknob effectively?
That's a nice way of wording that. I am not sure. I don't believe so, just because they don't have opposable thumbs. I will say I went ahead and looked at it. They're very good at learning things. They're good at moving latches. So if you wanted to jump on like a door latch or whatever, that could work. But instead of finding out if really mouse could move doorknobs, I more often found that mouse-shaped doorknobs. And now I have a weird Google history.
All right, okay.
Because they're like, look, you can get a door shaped like a mouse. And I'm just like, no, that's not what I want. But I don't think it's likely just because of how their paws are shaped that it would definitely be very difficult. Yeah. I think it would be more useful for a mouse to have maybe the pull door.
Oh yeah, like a little. What do they call? Like the pull things. Yeah, totally. All right, you are muted for some reason. I cannot hear you. I think it's my own fault. So let me fix that on my end. Should be okay now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Perfect. Yes, I can.
Yay. Okay. So no, I don't think it's likely, but if someone knows something else, go ahead and send it. Yeah,
totally.
I like
you can at Insight Check Pod on Twitter, or you can at Drunk Phytologist.
Yeah, just Drunk Phyto.
Drunk Phyto. Excuse me.
Yeah, because it's shorter.
Excuse me, Drunk Phyto. I think it's on the screen, so there you go.
Okay, close enough. You'll find it. It's fine.
Next. Let's get this out of the way. So there was an extended metaphor about the size of the bees that the group found. Yes. And the metaphor was that the bees that were found, they were all frozen, they were dead, presumably, yes. Were like thick Vespas in size. Can you tell me a little bit about size things?
Well, I can say that saying that they are big in comparison to you, which I'm pretty sure he was meaning Vespa as in the moped, generally speaking are pretty slim though. And especially because Vespa, the term is derived from the Italian word for wasp.
Isn't that interesting?
I think that maybe that was... I haven't seen many thick Vespas. I have seen, like, if I'm thinking about, like, a motorcycle, like one of those three-wheeled guys or, like, a big old Harley,
yeah.
Maybe that's more of what we're talking,
Let me get
a little bit more junk in the trunk.
Yeah, right.
Going on. But, for lengthwise, that works great, and that's fine. But I don't think he meant necessarily, because Vespas tend to not actually be very...
No, they seem to be like compact for your convenience.
Convenience, yeah, exactly. That was kind of their point, I'm pretty sure, but that's okay.
So you think that maybe a reference in size to like a VW Bug might actually be more appropriate.
Yeah,
And actually
I think that would be
punnier,
more,
right?
yeah, and punnier, yes. Especially because they're nice and, round.
Yeah, like a bee.
All like a
Yes.
bee,
Are
like
bees
all the,
round?
well, at least the bumblebees that Leap was talking about, but we'll get into that a little bit more later.
Sounds good to me.
Yep.
So, okay, great. Next question. Can honey make you see things?
Yes.
We had a moment where our bat friend Howie, the brother of Abinstern, IRL and in digital land, took a little lick of the honey, and we're all seeing ghosts now. So that's great.
Ghost honey, yep. So it depends on what's in the honey. So this is non-pasteurized honey, and that's for the reason of honey will be pasteurized sometime to make it easier to bottle, because it breaks up the different proteins and stuff in it. But it also breaks up like vitamins and good things and stuff for you. So usually it's strained to get out errant wax as well as bee parts, because there's gonna be some usually. But it also has a tendency to crystallize more, and it will have pollen in it. So it will have whatever pollen it is from the local plants. So sometimes and this is sort of an aside, but if you move to a new area and you're having a lot of allergies, a way to get your body used to it is to take a teaspoon of honey every night from like local honey, because that will get you exposed to the pollen, and then you won't have hay fever quite as much.
Gotcha.
But there is something called mad honey.
Ooh, tell me more.
Yes, so it comes from Turkey, and it usually happens with touristas who have the local honey and aren't used to it, because the pollen from rhododendrons, that's where they're native to in Turkey, actually have a toxin in them.
Oh, no.
And so, yes. So if you have a little bit on like your cereal or your granola or whatever, you get like a mild high.
Wow.
Just a little.
Is it like a neurotoxin?
Yeah, it's a neurotoxin.
Oh my goodness.
But it gives you a mild high, so it's real popular to have on your cereal. But what will happen is, one, if someone's not used to it, or two, they're like, oh, this stuff is great, let me have more. It will give you severe hallucinations.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so it's a psychedelic neurotoxin.
Yes, it's a psychedelic neurotoxin. So it can give you severe hallucinations and sometimes seizures, so they do not recommend for people. No, yeah, there's usually a couple cases every year of honey sickness. And it's from that stuff. It's from overindulging on the local honey. So
that might be what Howie has.
Yes. Howie might be. He can stop anytime.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
Poor guy. So we're gonna have to watch Howie. But yeah, so that's actually something.
This is what he gets up to when his brother's not here.
See, yeah, that's true. So that is something that they say that local beekeepers, if you want to keep your own bees, that rhododendrons or anything in that family, you've got to be careful that you don't necessarily have a lot nearby, because it doesn't bother the bees at all, but
they don't have the same neurology as we do.
No, they do not. And especially because the pollen, so bees don't just bring back nectar, they also bring back pollen. That's their main protein source for food. And so that always gets mixed into the honey, So unless it's a pasteurized honey and is really filtered, is going to be in there. And you won't be careful.
That's really interesting. I work with a woman who keeps bees, and I've been lucky enough to be provided with as much local honey as I want. So my immunity for the local pollen is real good right now. Now,
Yep.
DP, you've moved recently.
Yes.
Do you have any plans to obtain local honey so that you don't get allergies?
I actually was looking for some the other day
Hey,
because
look at that.
I was having some hay fever, so we've been looking around. Haven't found any yet, but I'm waiting for the local farmers market or whatever. But that is going to be a try because I did go on a great hike and then I came back home and sneezed for the next hour.
Oh,
so,
boy. Ugh.
and scared my cats. It was great.
Oh, boy. Let's see. What else do we have? So I guess we're gonna get into the bee talk. More bee talk. I asked you very specifically after the show, what bee do? Can you tell me what bee do?
What bee do depends on the bee.
So we were trying to analyze, you got into analyzing which bees the party has come across.
Yes.
Yes.
So there were a few things that we were going to say that it is magical bees and it is a magical game and that I'm going to let slide. But well, if we'll talk about bees in general.
So the bees that we've observed.
So the bees that we have observed live in a hive inside a hollow tree. Therefore, they are most likely honeybees. They could be European honeybees or they could be American honeybees. Now, they will have a queen who's in charge of everything. But
and when you say in charge of everything, you mean that she issues orders or she's there to reproduce or both of those things?
A little bit of both, although there is there's not a huge clear thing. She does decide if to move to a new hive.
Mm-hmm.
If they need to move, they will not leave without her. So if there's a threat or whatever, she could leave and decide, and they will follow wherever she goes. She also decides who is her boyfriend.
Mm-hmm.
And how many boyfriends she has.
Yeah, you had a plural on that one.
Yeah, boyfriends.
Yes, indeed.
Yes. She has her harem of boyfriends.
Harem.
Yes. Of boyfriends. And she also will have many daughters who do not breed. They are sterile. And they do most of the work. So the boyfriends are just supposed to hang out with the queen and, groom her and make her feel pretty and massage her. And then the daughters will bring back food. They will also care for any new eggs. There will be occasionally a new queen, which is laid, and they will care for her and give her a special kind of honey called royal jelly. And this royal jelly is what helps her develop into a new queen.
Ah, I see.
And then either what will happen is the new queen will either leave and start like her own hive, or she'll get kicked out by her mom.
Go make your own hive.
Yes. Or she will replace her mom if her mom is getting to like the end of her life or whatever.
Gotcha.
And so they do communicate a lot through hormones and different pheromones.
Mm-hmm.
And that is also a way that the different, we'll say, sisters and workers will tell each other where good places to eat are, and where to go. They've actually found that in bee behavior, and I listened to a great talk by an ecology group that works on bees, is if they put like fake flowers, and they put like a flower with a lot of nectar but no bees, and they put like bees, they like freeze-dried bees that they call zombies.
Mm-hmm.
It's really bad. And they tape them to the fake flower. The live bees will go to the one where there are more bees than the empty one.
Oh, wow. Huh.
And it's sort of they've got to know that there's something good right over there.
It's a higher probability of finding something that's useful for your species.
Yes, exactly. And so they will follow each other around, and then they will see where stuff is. They also have some intricate sort of, we'll say, dance moves.
Yes, indeed. as a
and
form of communication.
as a form of communication, as well as wing flaps and stuff like that.
Yeah. And you mentioned that the queen tends to be the only bee that survives through the winter. Is that?
Now, that's specifically for bumblebees.
Oh, okay, I see.
So, like a hiving bee, like our honeybees, so they survive by building the hive, building this big sort of warm place. They will overwinter and they will sort of hibernate, but they will reduce their metabolism a little bit. They will only sort of maintain the hive. They won't go out. Everything sort of slows down, and everyone kind of naps. But they will still be somewhat awake to just maintain stuff and care for things.
Gotcha.
And that's how like they survive. Versus most bees are solitary. And so, for example, there are about 4,000 native bee species in like North America, and basically they only live like that year. Like they hatch in the spring, they reproduce the stuff. If there's a female, she lays an egg. She will lay an egg either in, so for example, orchard bees will find hollow pieces of grass or small wood or stems, and what she'll do is she'll grab a bunch of pollen and she'll put it at the end of the stem. She'll put a big old dollop of nectar, she'll lay an egg, and then she'll get another ball of pollen and she'll put that there and she'll dollop and she'll lay an egg. And so she'll do that all the way down. And so it's several daughters usually, most of the time. And then when they hatch, they've got ready-made dinner right there.
Yes, indeed.
They eat their way out, right, then fly out. And then they will do that. And so these tend to be around flowering trees and stuff. So bumblebees, which were kind of what Leap said these were, but we'll say they're magical bumblebees, actually do not live in trees. They live underground.
Gotcha.
So the biggest colonies they usually make are only about 100 bees, and they tend to be pretty small. It will be a queen with her boyfriends that she's found. And she will go into usually an old rodent hole or some sort of bigger opening. And she will also have those sort of sterile daughters that will bring food and stuff. And they will make honey, but only a very small amount. They don't make a big comb or anything. And usually the queen is the only one that survives through the winter. So basically she has all these servants that get her all ready for the winter.
Yeah. Bye, queen. My
Bye.
queen. I die for you.
I die for you. And then the spring starts all over again. And so she'll only live for maybe a few years though. But they tend to be a bit more solitary. They also tend not to sting. So usually when someone gets a bumblebee, you usually have to really pester them or about step on them, and they'll usually bite instead.
Oh my gosh, I can't imagine.
Yeah, it's like...
I've heard that, like, in some cultures they've used ants as, like, sutures.
Oh, yeah.
And they'll, like, take an ant and have it bite you and then have the ant part go away and then the mandibles stay. That's pretty gnarly. I wonder if you
No, it's pretty gnarly. There are also some cultures, I don't know if you're familiar with bullet ants.
A little bit.
Basically, when they bite you, it feels like you've been shot. There's actually this is one insane. There's a coming of age ceremony that I had looked at where basically to be a man, you have to put your arm into a log full of bullet ants and let them bite you. And I'm like,
I don't need to be a man.
Nah.
Honestly, if that was the requisite for being a woman, I wouldn't need to be a woman either.
Yeah, no, I'm just like,
I'm good.
Nope.
I'm
good. And they're like, oh yeah, most of the time people are laid up for days and pass out. I'm like, no, duh.
That's
whoever came up with that.
Time. All right, and you had a little bit of information about the bees in general.
Oh, the bees in general, yes. So there has been a lot out there on sort of worrying about bees and pollinators and things, and that is good. Anything that are good for bees is good for other pollinators. So if you are doing more things like planting wild flowers, not spraying a bunch of chemicals, Good for you. Good job. But I will say that you have to be careful about certain things. There are a lot of, which I had read this, I didn't really know this, but quite recently an entomologist did put out a thread on Twitter talking about the bee houses that a lot of people that they're selling, which have like the little like wood straws in them and they look like a little house. Don't buy them. They're death traps.
Oh no.
This is what I have learned from the entomologist. The reason is most of them have a backing to them and there's only one way in, which means if there are parasitic wasps which like to feed on bees, they can't escape.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah.
It also has a tendency to, this because there's no ventilation, to breed mites and other parasites, which is no good.
Yep.
And also, most people don't know that you need to clean them regularly at the end of the season. Otherwise, more parasites and nasty things get up in there.
Yep.
And so the best thing is, which I can even link later, they had a great Twitter feed on how to build your own like bee house, which is actually very cheap to do, and also how to like put in either plastic straws or disposable ones. So at the end of the season, you can just take those out and throw those away, and how to properly clean it.
Yeah.
So that your local bees are healthy. It's good for them. It's good for you. But yeah, just don't buy any old bee house that's in the supermarket.
Bees as an indicator species of the health of an environment. Is that anything?
Yes.
Are they an indicator species?
Generally speaking, yes. And most of the time, people like butterflies. People like bees. And so if they're not doing well, probably there's something bad going on that other pollinators aren't doing well. So, but I will say sometimes it's a little overblown where all the bees are dying and we're going to have no food. Well, only about 2% of plants are pollinated by bees. And of those
almonds,
the people who are raising almonds and have trained these bees and trained these almonds to only be pollinated by bees are in big trouble. But in the general big scope, only about 2% of all plants are pollinated by bees. And of those bees, only a very, very, very small fraction are pollinated by honeybees, and we'll say European honeybees specifically. So the European honeybee was domesticated and brought over to the US. They live in hives. You can move the hives around. They don't really care. But they have been coming under different diseases. It's not really clear why. It's a combination of several things. Number one, not enough food and habitat, right? Of just regular old wildflowers and stuff. So when they say, oh, it's the engineered corn that's killing bees. No, that's not it, because bees don't eat corn. Corn is wind pollinated and has no nectar and is useless to them because it is a grass. Now, having no dandelions in your yard, that is a problem. Having no clovers, having no wildflowers, that is what they eat. And when you're spraying them all the time, even if people are like, these are weeds, don't do that, because the bees need stuff to eat.
They're also one of the earlier plants to come up in the spring, I think.
Right.
And that's helpful because they need all that nutrients right after the winter's over, because they're all starving for nutrients.
Right. Yep. So ephemeral flowers, we call them spring ephemerals, the first ones to come out after the snow, are very, very important for any insect that has been hibernating over the winter time to be able to get up and running, because that's going to determine how many of them are going to breed in the summer, how good the population is going to be, all that sort of stuff. That's number one. Number two, chemicals. As I said, that kind of goes with number one and two. As well as if you are gardening and stuff, a lot of people, if they have stuff die back, they will take those stems away. They will take away your dead leaves. They'll go burn them. They'll go throw them away. Actually, a lot of bugs and insects and solitary bees will overwinter in those stems and hibernate in those things. So let it be messy. Just leave it. Life is messy. Just let the mess leave. It's a beautiful mess. Just leave the mess. As well as the European honeybee specifically, has a mite problem, a parasitic mite problem. Usually, their immune system would be able to kick those, right? And it may be isolated to one hive, but there is some talk amongst beekeepers that certain hives are getting too inbred, that their genetics are too close, and that they don't have as strong as immune systems as they could have, and that might be why they're more susceptible to these sorts of diseases.
Gotcha.
And so it's something to be careful of, especially if you're wanting to keep bees or look at bees. Also, European honeybees are invasive in North America. There is an American honeybee. They are not kept very much just because they don't produce quite as much honey as the European ones do. They do not have stingers, though. They are stingless. They are pretty docile. But they will only live in like hollowed out logs. You try to bring them a hive that a European honeybee would be in, and they're like, I ain't going in there.
So they're not really domesticatable.
They
not
are
as much.
Not as much, yeah. Right? Not as easy to manipulate or whatever. Although there are some traditions in Central America that still keep them. As long as you're good to them and nice to them, they'll keep coming, to you sort of year after year. And say if they've got a log that they like, and then you give them like a bigger log, and then you will
upgrade.
I know, an upgrade. And then you can go and you can find the queen because she's big and fat in comparison to everyone else. And you would say, look, see this log. Do you like this log? And then she'd be like,
it's all right.
I don't know. It's all right. Maybe different drapes, But if she goes
I
in,
can
then
have my
everyone
workers
else...
work on that.
Yeah, exactly.
Ladies,
let's go. And then, but if she likes it, then everyone else will move.
Gotcha.
But I will say the European honeybees, since they have been domesticated or docile for a long time, they also kind of dumb. So if you put like a new queen or a different queen in there, she's like, oh, this is mine. And, and the rest will just follow.
Yeah,
so,
gotcha.
Because of that, it's something to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, sounds good. I want to talk about smelling now.
Okay, let's do it.
So I asked you in chat. So there was a lot of sniffing going on in the episode. I think they were. I'm trying to remember the circumstances. I think the ghost people were like giving them things to smell. I don't remember.
I think it was the potions. They were finding potions.
Yes.
And they were sniffing the potions.
And they were trying to figure out what was in the potions. And my question was, how well can these animals smell in reality?
Right.
Is that the sense that they would be using? So to lay it on me, tell me about smelling. Okay, so let's start with Jink. Jink is a pine marten.
Yes. So Jink will probably have a very acute sense of smell as a pine marten. They tend to do a lot of marking of their territory with, we'll say, various secretions to let other neighboring pine martens know who's boss and where they live, and different information as well. They have pretty big territories, but that also tend to overlap. They also, because they live in far places, they will range quite a bit to find prey. So their sense of smell is very important for finding prey because they are little murderers. Anything in the mink or weasel family will murder basically anything. Mm-hmm. Anything that's even like twice as big as them. They don't care. So he would most likely have the most acute sense of smell, actually, out of the whole group.
Gotcha.
For sure.
And I know that different animals see differently than humans do. Is there like a spectrum of scent where we could compare like how much a pine marten smells to how much a human smells?
Well, I would say probably the best way to put it would be, so if, say, Jurika and I were in the same room together, and Jurika is wearing perfume,
Like I usually
could,
do. Like I'm
like,
wearing right now. You don't
like I'm
know.
wearing right now. I could smell her perfume, right? Um, if I were in the same room. And maybe if you really put it on, like, a couple rooms away,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, right.
Versus if I were a pine marten, I could smell your perfume in the next house.
Gotcha. Understood.
Maybe 2 houses down.
Oh my goodness.
Yes.
Wowie. Very
Wowie.
sensitive nostrils, that pine
Yes,
marten
just a
has.
very small itty bitty particulates, especially when in wintertime, where going's tough and you really got to find something to eat and it might be under a bunch of snow. You can't necessarily rely on your eyes, but you definitely have to rely on that nose right there.
Gotcha. What about Howie, the bat?
Howie. So it depends on what kind of bat Howie is. So
I'm guessing he's an insectivore.
Yes.
Because we're guessing he's around the size of a mouse. So that's on the small side. That's a microbat.
That's a microbat.
As opposed to a macrobat, a bigger bat, a fruit bat.
Bigger bat. Yes.
Yeah, so that's my guess, but
yeah, so there is a little argument just because species of bats vary so widely.
Yeah.
They know that it is very important for when bats tend to be in colonies in close quarters. And so they know that they can detect not so much necessarily far away, but more smells at once.
Interesting.
Like a bouquet, if you will.
Fascinating. I mean, it makes sense.
To kind of tell who your brothers and sisters are and who your neighbors, and so because of that, they have more, I would say they can get more detail out of it. Although by how far away for insectivores are not really sure, because usually if you go into a cave with like a bat colony, it's just very pungent, and different bats will smell different ways. So like there's some groups where like this whole colony smells like tortilla chips, and this whole colony smells like fungus and dirt, and this whole colony smells like fruit. Why? We don't know. But there is some research that fruit-eating bats have a more acute sense of smell than maybe the other ones, because they have to find fruit in...
Fructivores?
Fructivores.
Yes. I have no idea.
I think.
I don't know.
I think that's actually what it is. I'm not sure.
I don't know.
Maybe. But because their prey doesn't move, generally speaking, fruit doesn't move.
I mean, in the wind it might sway a little bit. For its size, it moves a lot less than insects do. Insects
do, right. So insectivores actually rely on echolocation and hearing much more than they do scent to find their prey, as well as detecting small movements and things like that. Because in general, bats can't see worth a crap. Their eyesight's real bad. It's more of like, it's light, it's dark, and there's a big shape. Yeah. And that's about it.
But they don't need that. They don't need sight.
Yeah, they don't need it. So, and it's a good rule of thumb, if there is one sense that's reduced, the other ones are going to be more advanced, just in general in design. So there's some argument between New World fruiting bats versus Old World fruiting bats, but they tend to have a more advanced smell to be able to locate fruit in the dark. But that's still sort of ongoing research. Because those groups evolved echolocation and scent separately, but they still have the same sort of design. So we call it convergent evolution, which is we evolved separately and we split, but we still came up with a similar strategy to get what we want. So...
yeah. So maybe Howie's sense of smell was heightened by his hallucinations from the...
It could be. It could be. We don't know.
So then he was
Are they real smells? Are they fake smells? We don't know.
I don't know for sure.
It's fine.
How about Wensleydale, the otter?
So Wensleydale will have a pretty good sense of smell, probably better than ours. Um, they have done some research to show like if you have an otter and you set if you put like a good yummy clam in the water and you put a spoiled one, they know which one the spoiled one is.
Okay.
Like they can smell if it's no good or if it's like on the
You're no
edge.
good, you're no good, you're
Good.
no good. Clam,
Good.
you're no good.
Good.
Anyway,
Good.
gonna say
That's right.
it again. Anyway,
But
continue.
yeah, continue. So they are able to smell things underwater and the best food underwater, although it tends to
Fascinating.
be,
How does that even work?
it's kind of, well,
Because I
I'm
feel like the
honestly,
smells would be like wouldn't get anywhere because you're dealing with a liquid.
yeah, well, and so they will plug their nose, but what they'll do is they'll only let just a little tiny bit of water in, but they're somehow able to sense that a little bit. But they also will usually grab food, bring it up,
Yeah.
float over and examine it, like, you know, which one of these is better. But they're not entirely sure, although it seems to be that hearing is more important for otters than smell is. Because they're usually very social and they will have specific calls for each other. They'll have specific, we'll say, names for each other. A lot of differences between families on who can tell whose whose kid this is, whose mom this is, like all this other stuff. And so there's a lot of variation in the sounds they make.
Gotcha.
And so it seems
I
that
remember
hearing
when
is
I
something.
was like in the mall or like at the amusement park or like out on vacation, like my parents used to have this like call. It was, I don't know if I can do it because it's a whistle.
Oh, okay. I'm ready.
So it's two low notes and then two higher notes.
Yeah.
And that was the hey y'all in this family, I need your attention kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So I guess we're just otters, hairless otters, hairless land otters with no tails.
Hairless land otters. Here you go. It's a good strategy. It's like my one friend who she told me like when her son was little, she would dress him all in red, but she's like, but not just like a red coat. Like, oh no, like red socks, red pants, red shirt. And then it's be like, which one's your kid? It's the kid in red. And then it's like, I ain't never going to, I'm not going to lose him. She also told me he was too loud to get kidnapped anyway.
There you go.
I'm like,
it's a good deterrent.
If that's a compliment or not.
Let's move on to Long Sparkly Trail.
Long Sparkly Trail. Yes. Actually, out of our mammals, see, the thing is that she may even have a more sensitive
This is a dumb question. A snail's not a mammal, though.
No. It's more of the, out of the mammals, Jink would be the one that has, sorry, I should have finished that sentence. The pine marten Jink would have the most acute sense of smell.
Oh, I see. Good for him.
Long Sparkly Trail may give him a run for his money, though.
I see.
Because snails rely on their sense of smell / taste, which those are kind of connected together, a lot, like almost exclusively, because they do not hear. They have no sort of ear organ.
No ear holes.
No ear holes. Nope, none of those. They can sense vibration, but that's about it. And they can see, although nobody's sure how much detail, but they can recognize light and dark and large objects, but you usually have to get pretty close to them and they're like, oh no. Yes. But they tend to really rely on their sense of smell. So I see the little picture that Draika put up, so then I won't have to I can make my dumb face anyway, but they have little tentacles, lower tentacles near the bottom of their mouth, and they use those to sniff and to taste. And so as they go along, those go out in front of them as they move, and they can pick up very tiny particulates of food to find where food is. They also can smell other other trails, either ones they've gone or ones that friends or family has gone and they're like, ooh, that may be a good spot to go eat, right? Or a safe place to go rest. And as well as old trails that they've gone where like, oh, I've went this way before, and so they rely on that very heavily. There are also some carnivorous snails.
Oh my goodness,
that hunt other snails.
That's terrifying.
And it is terrifying. and they will find their prey that way.
Oh no.
No.
And they tend to be the bigger snails, right?
Yes. So your littler ones tend to be all your herbivores and stuff. And there's not, now don't quote me on this, but I'm pretty sure there's not a huge number of carnivorous snails, but they tend to be the big ones. Yeah, that will go ahead and engulf smaller ones.
Oh no, goodness. LST, watch out, LST. We're praying for you, buddy.
No, it's gonna be fine. There's not gonna be big carnivorous snails coming after you. You have missed your step. You can get away.
Oh no.
You're a druid and it's fine.
Anyway.
You've missed your step and you can get away quickly.
Yes, indeed. In your Vespa or on your
on your Vespa, yeah.
Good stuff. Alrighty. Was there anything else we wanted to talk about? All the questions I had.
I think that was it.
Yeah.
I already talked about all my bee stuff and how to be good to your bees and good to your butterflies, but just good to your bugs in general. More bugs, more good stuff.
Yes.
Go to your local nursery, get native plants,
or just plant flowers, and don't have a big stupid green lawn with nothing in it because it's useless. There we go. That's DP's hot take.
There you go. Put some plants in your yard, gosh darn it.
Some plants in your yard, gosh darn it, not just stupid grass. Okay, there we go. Someone's mad at me, I'll fight them.
At Drunk Fido on Twitter.
At Drunk Fido, come fight me.
Cool. And on that note, this has been Smoltalk. We hope that you'll visit us next time. We plan to do these usually the day or the day after that day of the small folk game.
Yes.
So you see the small folk game, and then we'll be on the channel at the same time, usually the next day or the day after.
Yes.
And if you have any questions at all, at DP on Twitter, her Twitter's below. I'm taking a Twitter break. You can at me, but maybe you won't get a response. You can also find me at Insight Check Pod. If you at Insight Check Pod, it will get back to me eventually.
Yep. And I'm sure they'll pass. And I'm sure Arrow will pass it on.
Yes, indeed.
Some things.
Exactly.
Or whatever. Yeah.
And that's it. We'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.